After 10 years of absolute silence, she brazenly demanded a fortune, completely unaware that my hidden binder of undeniable receipts was waiting to brutally destroy her entire hypocritical family facade. 10 years ago, my mother drove a knife into my heart with a declaration. I was dead to this family, simply because I insisted on marrying the woman I loved. 10 years later, just as my wife's and my tech company had a successful IPO with an $800 million valuation, this dead man unexpectedly welcomed an uninvited guest right at the doorstep of his oceanfront Belle Epoque villa. It was my mother. She appeared after a decade of cutting off contact, without a single apology, without a single look of remorse. Instead, she casually threw a handwritten list in blue ink onto the marble countertop, demanding that I pay exactly $1,500 to settle the debts of my prodigal younger brother and fund her retirement. She was absolutely certain that this abandoned child would, for the sake of bloodlines, obediently write a check and pay tribute. But she was dead wrong. She didn't know that, instead of crying and begging for love over the past 10 years, I had quietly created an archive of betrayal. A ruthless binder containing exactly 34 receipts, the coldest physical evidence recording every single one of their betrayals and deprivations. Today, I will use that very binder to smash that hypocritical facade into pieces. Before I reveal how I turned the tables and pushed them out of my life once and for all, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment to let me know what in this story shocked and impressed you the most. In Beausoleil, you can smell the scent of money and the luxury of Monaco with every sea breeze that sweeps up the hillside. But inside the four walls of the stone house owned by the Grimaldi family, the only stench that lingered year-round was the suffocation, the hypocrisy, and the rotting prejudices. My family was an ecosystem operating on cruel and silent rules. My father, Pierre, was a diligent superyacht maintenance worker at Port Hercules. In stark contrast to the multi-million-dollar vessels he polished every day, his life was a series of cowardly submissions. He brought home the smell of diesel oil, mixed with the bitter taste of sea salt, exchanging it for absolute silence in the face of his wife's authority. My mother, Camille, was a domineering, uncrowned queen. She managed everything in the house, from the daily schedule and finances to imposing unwritten laws that no one was allowed to oppose. Her greatest weapon was not screaming or smashing things, but her razor-sharp, mocking sarcasm and a psychological manipulation so profound that you would feel guilty even when you were the victim. In that family circus, roles were divided in a way that was clear and disgustingly unfair. All the spotlight and the most blind pampering were entirely reserved for my younger brother, who was 5 years my junior, Antoine. Antoine was a broker for luxury supercars and yachts, a highly sociable, loud man who harbored grandiose delusions about the upper class. He wore custom-tailored suits, sprayed expensive Tom Ford cologne that overpowered my father's scent of sweat, and drove borrowed supercars to show off in Monte Carlo. Antoine was always drowning in debt, his credit cards constantly at the red alert threshold, but in my mother's eyes, that was merely an investment in relationships. Every mistake, every bad habit, every tens of thousands of dollars in debt belonging to Antoine was excused by Camille, with the beautiful euphemism of the personality of a great man doing great things. In contrast, I, Luc Grimaldi, despite being 42 years old, always doing my duty, always providing fully, and playing the role of a diligent chief financial officer, was turned into a true invisible man in my own home. I was the one who paid the hospital bills when my mother was sick, the one who silently resolved the messy tax paperwork for the house, the one who always achieved excellent grades from high school through college. But my independence and talent were viewed by the family as a boring given. When I was promoted to the position of Chief Financial Officer, my mother's reaction was merely a cold fine, right before she immediately turned to excitedly praise the financed Rolex watch that Antoine had just bought. In their eyes, I was an emotionless cash-counting machine, not worth caring about, a shadow only allowed to materialize when they needed to pay a bill. But the days of languishing in that invisible cocoon were smashed to pieces on the day I met her. Juliette Leclerc was not a girl stepping out from the fake aristocratic world that my mother always worshipped. She was an outstanding female student majoring in financial technology at the International University of Monaco. In complete contrast to the arrogant ladies of the Riviera, Juliette possessed a healthy dark complexion, sharp eyes that could see through any lie, and a cold, logical mind that concealed a deeply empathetic heart. Her mother, Brigitte, was a retired human resources manager at a casino in Monte Carlo, who had taught Juliette how to stand on her own 2 feet since she was a child. Juliette was my anchor. She was the first person to look at me as a man of true value, rather than a financial tool of the Grimaldi family. The turning point, the slap that tore off the family's mask, occurred on an evening in the middle of the fall semester when I officially brought Juliette home for dinner. The air in the dining room that evening was as thick and cold as a morgue. The dining table was covered with a pure white lace cloth, and the silver cutlery clashing against the porcelain plates created shrill, dry clinking sounds. From the very moment Juliette stepped through the door, the implicit class and racial discrimination was evident on Camille's face. She swept her sharp gaze from Juliette's natural curly hair down to the simple office shoes she was wearing, then smiled a contemptuous smirk. Throughout the meal, the Grimaldi family treated Juliette like thin air. They deliberately ignored all her attempts to strike up a conversation. "Antoine, my darling son." Camille raised her dark red wine glass, deliberately raising her voice so it echoed throughout the room. "Are you attending the deputy mayor's yacht party this weekend? Our family needs high-class connections like that. Do not be like some people who only know how to bury their faces in mindless computers their whole lives." Juliette maintained her calm demeanor, smiling gently as she cut her steak. I felt hot blood rushing to my face. I slammed my fork down on the table. The sharp collision made the entire dining room freeze. Juliette is at the top of her entire master's class at the university. "Mother," I growled, trying to keep my tone very slow and clear. "She is developing a digital asset management platform that even banks in Paris are eyeing. I think that is far more to be proud of than serving wine for others on a yacht." Antoine burst out laughing, a savage and insolent laugh. He threw his napkin on the table and smirked, looking at Juliette with disgusted eyes. Financial technology, a brat of color trying to do fintech. "Listen here, Luke. Do not bring shame to this family. Does she think learning a few algorithms in Monaco can wash away the stench of poverty from her family? Her mother is just an old woman working for a casino. Do not even dream of climbing high." A deadly silence enveloped the room. The smell of roast beef suddenly became nauseating. My father, Pierre, kept his face down at his plate, eating diligently like a coward who didn't dare to breathe heavily, letting his son and wife insult his eldest son's woman. I waited for my mother to speak up and correct Antoine. I waited for a final glimmer of what was called family affection. But no. Camille leisurely took a sip of wine, her razor-sharp eyes looking straight at Juliette, and then delivered the final blow with a shocking, cold, and cruel statement that severed the last vein of affection in me. Antoine is right, Luke. Do not bring trash into this house. This Grimaldi family may not be billionaires, but we are white people with roots in the Riviera. She is not one of us. She will never step foot on the same level as this family. If you want to play around with her casually, that is up to you, but don't expect me to accept an inferior breed walking through the doors of the Grimaldi home. My heart didn't beat faster. It seemed to stop entirely. The naked humiliation and ruthless racial discrimination uttered from the very mouth of the mother I had gritted my teeth to provide for over decades. I looked over at Juliette. She didn't cry. Her eyes were resilient, quiet, and as sharp as a sword, piercing straight into Camille's pathetic nature. "Thank you for dinner," Juliette said, her voice terrifyingly calm. She stood up without a single wasted movement, without a hint of panic. "Material poverty can be changed by intellect, Madame Camille. But the rotting character of your family cannot be hidden, no matter how much Monaco money you pile on top of it. How dare you be so insolent?" Camille screamed, slamming her hand down on the table, knocking over the wine glass, the blood-red liquid spreading across the pure white tablecloth. "That's enough," I roared. The explosive sound from my chest made Antoine jump, and my father dropped his fork. It was the first time in my 42 years of life that the invisible man let out a roar. I pushed my chair back and stood up, gripping Juliette's hand tightly. I looked straight into the eyes of the domineering woman who gave birth to me, my eyes now holding nothing but ultimate contempt. Mother is right. Juliette doesn't belong in this family, because she is too pure and great to stand in the same place as rotting parasites like you and Antoine. From this moment on, embrace your fake class and live with it alone. Having said that, I turned and walked away, pulling Juliette out of that suffocating house, reeking of hypocrisy. I didn't know that the moment the oak door slammed shut behind my back was also the moment the countdown for a 10-year rupture officially began. And I also didn't know that a cruel ultimatum letter was waiting for me ahead, igniting the most ruthless system of receipts I had ever created. 2 years. That was the time Juliette and I relied on each other, building a new life, completely shaking off the suffocation and hypocrisy of the Grimaldi family. We lived in a cramped, rented apartment, but filled with light and the breath of freedom, completely opposite to the thick atmosphere like a morgue in Beausoleil. During those 2 years, I watched Juliette stay awake countless nights, typing every line of code for her digital asset management platform, and I knew I had found a true queen, rather than those wearing fake aristocratic shells. The final breaking point, the moment that permanently changed the blood flowing in my veins, happened on a Thursday. That night, beside the cramped dining table overflowing with papers and business plans, I looked deep into her calm, sharp eyes. There were no candles, no roses, nor an ostentatious diamond ring. I just held Juliette's slender hand and said with all my life, "Let me build an empire with you. Marry me." Juliette did not hesitate. For even a second, she nodded. The next morning, I made a fatal mistake of someone who still had some garbage illusions about blood ties. I decided to call home to announce the marriage. Camille picked up. When I said I would marry Juliette, the other end of the line fell into a chilling silence. The silence lasted exactly 8 seconds, swallowing the last rays of hope. Then she hissed through her teeth, her voice as emotionless and cruel as a knife slicing down a throat. "You better think carefully about the consequences this inferior decision brings to the Grimaldi family." Then she hung up abruptly. A few days later, an envelope made of expensive textured parchment was sent to our apartment. My mother's careful handwriting in blue ink sat proudly on the page, but the content inside was a naked death sentence, a ruthless ultimatum written to trample on another person's dignity. The letter had only 3 short paragraphs, and the last paragraph was engraved into my brain like a burning scar. If you dare step into the city hall to sign the marriage paper with that trash of color, then never show your face back to this house. You are spitting on our Riviera roots. She is not one of this family, and will never ever be qualified to step through the doors of the Grimaldi home. Sign that paper, and you will no longer be a Grimaldi. My heart didn't bleed, it immediately turned into a solid block of ice. I didn't scream, didn't smash things. The cruelty of the letter completely killed the patient's son named Luc Grimaldi. I coldly folded that textured parchment paper, stuffed it into an envelope, and locked it securely in a drawer. Our wedding took place on a Friday in September, when the Mediterranean breeze blew along the slopes of the Principality of Monaco, carrying the salty taste of the sea and the bitterness of abandonment. The ceremony was held very simply at La Condamine City Hall. Juliette looked beautiful like a goddess in a delicate cream-colored wedding dress she quickly bought at a vintage shop in the Larvotto area. There were no super luxury cars, no guests wearing sparkling tuxedos, and of course, no one from the Grimaldi family showed up. But there, amidst the solemn silence of the city hall, I received the fiercest and most unconditional love from someone who didn't share my bloodline. Brigitte, Juliette's mother, a woman who spent her whole life working at a Monte Carlo casino, stepped forward and hugged me tightly. She pressed her rough hands on my cheeks, looked straight into my eyes with the resilient gaze of a true mother, and said, "Welcome to the family, my son." In that moment, a powerful tremor ran down my spine. Family is not those who share your last name, but wait to tear you apart. Family is those who stand there to protect you when you are most naked and vulnerable. After the ceremony at the City Hall, we pushed a few tables together at a small seafood restaurant on Avenue Princesse Grace. The clinking of glasses, the joyous laughter of 11 closest friends drowned out the emptiness from the vacant chairs. But deep down, when I looked at the cheap wedding flowers placed on the table, a dull pain still screamed. I had married the most wonderful woman in the world, but the people who gave birth to me ruthlessly turned their backs. A week later, on September 12, 2014, with a final stubbornness of flesh and blood, I placed a wedding photo of us, taken on the steps of La Condamine City Hall, into an envelope and sent it to Beausoleil. I had written behind the photo, "We are very happy. I hope someday you can be happy for us." 14 days later, on September 26, that envelope returned to my mailbox. I stood in the middle of the living room, the faint afternoon sunlight casting on the wooden floor, holding the envelope in my hand. It wasn't torn, wasn't thrown away. It was rejected in the most systematic and cold manner. Right in the middle of the envelope was a bright red stamp, sharp, ruthlessly heartless from the post office. "Return to sender." I stared at that blood-red layer of ink. The ultimate shock dealt a fatal blow to my mind, not with swords, but with an absolute physical rejection. Their contempt was so great that they didn't even bother to tear it up. They used an administrative stamp to spit on my existence. In that moment, all remnants of forgiveness in me burned to ashes. A cold, calculating, and dark fire began to glow in my head. If they wanted to use coldness to end me, I would use that very emotionless cruelty to settle the score with them. I turned around, walked out of the apartment, took long murderous strides to the nearest stationery store. I bought an expensive navy blue hardcover binder, a hole puncher, and a red ink pen. Returning home, I slumped down at my desk. With hands as steady as a rock, not trembling at all, I picked up my mother's cruel ultimatum letter, placed it along with the wedding photo envelope bearing the red stamp into the hole puncher. Click! Click! The metal sound crushing through the paper rang out dry, decisive like a final gunshot. I clipped them into the cold metal rings of the binder. I pulled out the red pen, carefully, writing on the top corner of the returned envelope. Item number 1. Sent on September 12, 2014. Returned on September 26, 2014. From the moment the sound of the metal rings snapped shut, my archive of betrayal was officially born. This navy blue binder would no longer be an ordinary notebook. It would be a ledger of life and death, the archive of betrayal, the eternal sentence containing the most ruthless physical receipts that the Grimaldi family had created with their own hands. They didn't know that the red stamp rejecting this son was the very first pickaxe digging a grave to bury their power alive in the future. I would archive, and would use this very binder to crush their arrogance on a not-so-distant day. 10 years. A full decade. That was enough time for a river to change its course, enough for an empire to rise, and more than enough time for the cruel heartlessness of the Grimaldi family to take deep root in my very marrow. The plot of my life during those 10 years was two distinct parallel lines. On one side was the brilliant flourishing of the small family I protected with blood and tears. On the other side was the chillingly macabre abandonment by the very people who shared my blood. In the early days, after being kicked out of the family, Juliet and I waded through the mud of contempt together. We turned a cramped, mouldy, rented apartment into the first headquarters of our digital asset management platform. During sleepless nights stretching until 3 in the morning, the blue light from the computer screen cast onto Juliet's healthy dark skin as she frantically typed every line of code, while I, an unpaid chief financial officer, strained my eyes calculating every single penny to keep the company alive. We didn't have super yacht parties in Monte Carlo. We didn't have expensive glasses of champagne. We only had each other and an insane ambition. We had to succeed to crush their disdain. In May of our 4th year, the brightest light of my life appeared. Baby Theo was born. My son's first cry tore through all the darkness in my soul. Amidst the most exhausting nights of childcare, Grandmother Brigitte appeared like a savior. That woman, who used to work as a human resources manager at a casino with her rough hands, was willing to wake up at 1 in the morning, cradle Theo in her arms, rock him, and sing the gentlest lullabies. She stayed for 3 full weeks to cook every meal, wash every diaper, and care for Juliet and me with unconditional love, free of calculation. Watching how Brigitte cherished her grandson, I bitterly realized something. Family is not determined by a birth certificate. Family is those who stand there, ready to catch you when the world around you collapses. In contrast to that light-filled home, the only thing echoing back from the town of Beozalale was a sickening ruthlessness. Despite swearing to myself never to bow down, deep inside, a weak remnant of flesh and blood still made me act foolishly sometimes. Every birthday, every Christmas, I sent cards home. And the answer was always a cruel physical rejection. The envelopes were continuously thrown back with the same vicious bright red post office stamp, "Return to sender." But the peak of their psychological crime, the stab that destroyed the last shred of humanity left in me, occurred when baby Theo turned 1 year old. I had printed a photo of Theo smiling radiantly, his eyes as clear as an angel's, stuffed it into an envelope, and sent it back to his grandparents. For 14 days there was no reply. Then, on the afternoon of the 15th day, that envelope returned to my mailbox. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room. The envelope was no longer intact. The original glue seal had been brutally ripped open, and then it was carelessly resealed with a layer of clear tape before being returned to the post office. A chill ran down my spine. They had opened it. They had pulled the photo out, had stared at the angelic face of their own biological grandson. And after satisfying their cheap curiosity, instead of picking up the phone to make a call, they used tape to seal the child's smile and threw it away like filthy trash. Refusing to accept a letter is stubbornness, but deliberately looking at and then personally discarding a newborn baby is the ultimate form of malice. My hands trembled violently, not from pain, but because a primal rage was swallowing me whole. I walked to my desk, pulling out the navy blue binder. Click, click. The sound of the hole puncher grinding through the paper rang out sharply. Item number 23, photo of baby Theo, opened and viewed, taped shut and thrown back. I underlined the words with a red pen. From that moment on, the patient Luke Grimaldi was completely dead. That absolute heartlessness only began to waver when the foul smell of money wafted straight into the noses of the vultures. In the 10th year, Juliet's fintech company made history. The Series B funding round was a resounding success, with $25 million, pushing the company's valuation to $120 million. Images of Juliet and me appeared on the covers of financial magazines all over Paris and the Riviera. We were no longer invisible nobodies. We were newly emerged tycoons, holding the power to dictate the rules of the game. And of course, the greed of parasites never sleeps. Just 3 weeks after the news exploded, I received an anonymous email from Elodie, a rare high school friend I still kept in touch with. Attached to the email was a compressed image file. Luke, I was accidentally added to your family group chat before they could delete it. I think you need to read these disgusting things. I opened the screenshot files. Striking my eyes were the naked, nauseatingly foul messages of the Grimaldis thirsting to tear me apart. Camille, mother. A $120 million valuation. His wife's company is on the news. This whole town combined isn't even worth a fraction of their assets. Luke must take responsibility and provide for this house. This is his bloodline. He cannot deny his roots. Antoine, younger brother. Excellent. Drag him back, Mom. The creditors are threatening to seize my supercar showroom over a $350,000 debt. Just throw a fake family reunion party, squeeze out a few tears, saying, "You miss your eldest grandson." Even if his wife is an inferior monkey of color, their money spends just fine. Just do it. That weakling is always desperate for your attention, Mom. Just nod and praise him once, and he'll obediently get on his knees, write a check, and pay off my debts immediately. Pierre, father, isn't that a bit too much? After all, we haven't spoken to him in 10 years, and we threw away all the letters he sent. Camille, shut your mouth, Pierre. You are such a coward. I make the decisions in this house. He carries the Grimaldi name. He was born to serve this family. This isn't begging. This is an entitlement. Force him to spit out the cash. I sat motionless on the leather chair in my office, the light from the computer screen reflected in my eyes, which were already as cold as ice. Not a single tear fell. The hurt had been completely incinerated, making way for extreme contempt. In their eyes, I would never be a son, never be a human being. They considered me a malfunctioning ATM, and now they wanted to use a hypocritical family play to smash that ATM open and loot it. I slowly started the printer. The sound of paper running through screeched in the silent night of the villa. I picked up the stack of screenshots, feeding them into the hole puncher. Click. Click. The cold metal rings opened and slammed shut. Item number 34. Evidence of filthy greed. The navy blue binder was now heavy. I stroked the cover of the binder, cracking a brutal half-smile, murderous intent surging in my chest. You want to put on a family act to suck my blood? Fine, just show your faces here. The game is only truly beginning now, and I swear I will personally use this binder to nail the coffin shut, burying your disgusting arrogance forever. That October, the bell signaling the opening of the trading session on the Euronext Paris Stock Exchange rang out, tearing through all the limitations that the Grimaldi family had once used to hold me down. Juliet's digital asset management tech empire officially had its IPO. The electronic board flashed continuously, displaying a number that shocked the entire Riviera financial world. An $800 million valuation. On paper, after just one night, my wife's and my net worth reached $80 million. We were no longer invisible people living in a cramped rented apartment reeking of mold. We were true tycoons. The camera flashes of the Paris media blinked constantly, but in my head, the sound of the metal hole puncher of the navy blue binder seemed to be counting down. The brilliant scent of wealth always has the power to awaken the hungriest vultures. I knew they would come. Exactly 3 days after that earth-shattering event, the doorbell at our Belle Epoque-style villa rang. The wind from the Mediterranean Sea blew across the porch, bringing with it the bitter, salty smell of the sea, mixed with the scent of jasmine. Through the security camera screen, I saw an uninvited guest. Camille Grimaldi. 10 years without a word. 10 years of abandonment. And now, she stood at my doorstep with a rolling suitcase and a stiff silk dress. She spent exactly 45 seconds hesitating on the sidewalk before reaching out to press the doorbell. I opened the door. The silence between mother and son lasted exactly 7 seconds. There was not a single tear of reunion. There was no trembling embrace of maternal love. She looked at me with a brazenly judgmental gaze, sweeping from the cashmere sweater I was wearing down to the Italian marble floor beneath my feet. "Come in," I said in a voice as cold as ice, taking a step back, completely stripping away the title of mother. She stepped inside, the sound of her heels pounding against the floor deafening. We sat across from each other at the kitchen island. No tea, no coffee, no welcoming reception. I simply pushed a glass of filtered water toward her. Coffee is only for those who deserve to stay. She didn't beat around the bush. The fake arrogance of the faux Riviera aristocracy made her blindly believe she was still the one in control. She reached into her leather handbag, pulled out a quarter-folded piece of paper, and casually placed it down with a click on the white marble countertop. It was a handwritten list in blue ink. 5 bullet points, each item accompanied by a $sign. Mother came to talk about the future of our family. Camille spoke up, that familiar moral preaching tone ringing out clearly, without a single blink. Your father and I have worked hard our whole lives. Antoine's showroom is on the verge of bankruptcy due to debt. You have too much now, and it is time you fulfill the duty of someone bearing the Grimaldi name. She used a bright red painted fingernail to tap on the piece of paper. $800,000 for your parents' retirement fund. $350,000 to pay off debts and college tuition for Antoine's children. $250,000 to redeem the mortgaged house. $85,000 for your father's knee surgery. And $5,000 for a monthly allowance. A total of $1,500,000. She held her head high, her sharp eyes gleaming with the ultimate brazen demand. This is what flesh and blood should do for each other, Luke. Family never abandons one another. Your parents have forgiven your mistake 10 years ago. Now is the time for you to repay this family $1.5 million. An ultimatum disguised under the cloak of family morality. Not a single word of apology. Not a single question about the grandson Theo, whom she had never met. She ordered me to write a check like a mindless ATM machine. She was absolutely certain that this son who once yearned for love would kneel in submission. But she was wrong. The person sitting in front of her was no longer the wounded child of 10 years ago. My heart didn't beat any faster. I didn't scream, I wasn't indignant, nor did I shed a single tear of resentment. The tension in the room was abruptly cut off by a cruel mechanical action. I slowly pulled open the bottom drawer, took out a heavy object and threw it into the middle of the marble table. Thud. The navy blue hardcover binder. "You brought a list demanding money," I said. My voice so deep and cold it made the air in the kitchen seem to freeze. I also have a list of my own. The only difference is, my list comes attached with receipts. I flipped open the metal rings. The clicking sound rang out dryly. 34 naked historical proofs were exposed. Item number 1. I pulled out the yellowed envelope, tossing it straight toward her. My wedding photo. Sent on September 12, 2014. Given a bright red stamp reading "Return to sender by your own hands." You banned me from the house, denied the existence of my wife, and now you preach about family morality to demand $500,000. Camille's face began to change, shifting from pride to pale. She leaned back, stammering, "Luke, that is a matter of the past, Mother Just." "I am not finished," I growled, flipping hard to the middle cluster of pages, pulling out the paper sealing the photo of baby Theo. Item number 23. A newborn baby. You tore the envelope, pulled out the photo of your own grandson to satisfy your cheap curiosity, then coldly taped it back up and threw it at the post office like filthy trash. You say family never abandons one another. Your malice lies right on this layer of tape. You dared to collect these things. She trembled violently, her eyes wide with panic as she realized her ability to distort the truth had been completely stripped away by undeniable physical evidence. "I collected every cruel breath of this family," I roared, the sound exploding like thunder, flipping straight to the very last page. Item number 34. Evidence of filthy greed. I threw the stack of family group chat screenshots right at her face. The sharp pieces of paper slid across the marble surface. "I know everything. I read every single foul message from you and Antoine. You called my wife an inferior monkey of color. Antoine called me a weakling starved for attention to squeeze out money to pay his debts. You people consider me a malfunctioning ATM, and now you show your faces here, putting on a play of deep affection to drain my assets. Mother, let me tell you a truth. My net worth is $80 million, and you will never touch even a single penny of it." Camille's arrogance shattered completely. The shell of authority was smashed into pieces that could not be patched together. She panted, her two trembling hands gripping the edge of the table tightly, her panicked eyes looking around like a rat backed into a corner. Right at that moment, the sound of footsteps rang out. Juliet stepped into the kitchen. She wasn't wearing luxurious designer clothes, just an old frayed flannel shirt, holding a mug of coffee, radiating a fragrant aroma. The female fintech CEO, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, the woman the Grimaldi family had once spat upon as an inferior breed, stepped closer and stood silently beside me. Not a single word of sarcasm, not a single smirk. She just stood there, radiating the authority of absolute calmness. The solid wall we had built together stood tall, crushing every manipulative effort. Juliet's silent gaze was like a finishing knife stroke, falling upon Camille's pathetic state. All illusions of the domineering mother's power officially collapsed. "Pack up your trash and get out of my house," I bent down, looking deep into her terrified eyes, dropping each word sharply. "You chose abandonment. Now, embrace that abandonment and live with it for the rest of your life. Never come back here unless you learn how to get on your knees and apologize." There was no screaming in response. There was no more resistance. Camille clumsily stood up, her legs unsteady. She tremblingly picked up her $1.5 million demand list, shoved it hastily into her handbag, and then silently dragged her suitcase out the door. She didn't get even a single penny. The sound of the suitcase wheels dragging across the marble floor sounded pathetic and humiliating. When the carved oak door of the villa slammed shut, it didn't create a piercing noise. It only let out the sound of someone realizing they had just lost the only power that even Monaco money could not buy back. The game was over, and the navy blue binder had won. Silence crashed down upon the Belle Epoque villa the moment the carved oak door slammed shut behind Camille. I stood there, my silhouette cast on the Italian marble floor, my chest heaving but not out of fear. It was the breathing of someone who had just manually torn off the rusted chains that had choked his neck for 42 years. The navy blue binder lay still on the kitchen island, its cold metal rings having flawlessly completed their ruthless mission, executing a rotting family illusion. The hurricane seemed to have passed, but its remnants were still struggling. On Wednesday morning at exactly 10 a.m., my phone vibrated. A number from the town of Betrayal flashed on the screen. My mother had failed, and now it was time for her most cowardly accomplice to speak up. It was my father, Pierre. I swiped the screen, pressed the phone to my ear, but said absolutely nothing. On the other end of the line was a heavy, shattered sigh. "Luke." Pierre's voice was trembling, hoarse, and so pathetic that I almost didn't recognize the once robust superyacht maintenance worker. "I am a coward. For the past 10 years, I let your mother and Antoine torment you. I sat still during that damn dinner. I sat still when your mother sent the letter disowning you. I am sorry. Luke, I am truly 1,000 times sorry." A deadly silence lasted exactly 25 seconds. 10 seconds for his cowardice, 10 seconds for my deprived childhood, and the final 5 seconds for me to establish a new sentence. "Are you crying, Pierre?" I spoke up, my voice cold and sharp, like a scalpel cutting straight to his core. "Your silence that year was cruel and 100 times more lethal than Camille's curses. You stood watching them insult the woman I love. You folded your arms watching them reject your own flesh and blood grandson. You are not her victim. You are an accomplice. I know I deserve to die." Pierre sobbed, the sound of an old man who had just realized he had lost everything. "I am not asking you for money, Luke. I swear to God. I just want to know my son is okay. I just want to hear my grandson's voice once." I closed my eyes. Even though the fire of hatred had burned down almost all affection, deep inside me, a fragile seed of humanity still remained. I am not a demon, but I am no longer the weakling they could trample on whenever they pleased. Listen closely. I growled every word, creating an unbreakable steel boundary. I won't block your number. You can call me once every 2 weeks. But you are absolutely not allowed to mention Camille. Not a single word about Antoine's debts, and don't ever dream of meeting Theo until I allow it. If you cross this boundary by even a millimeter, this door will be concreted shut forever. Are we clear? I understand. Thank you, Luke. Thank you. I hung up, tossing the phone onto the sofa. Just a few hours later, the screen lit up again. This time it was a barrage of trash messages from Antoine. The megalomaniac was being pushed to a dead end because creditors were seizing his supercar showroom. You are cold-blooded. Go die with your dirty money. Mom is getting IV fluids from shock, and you sit there enjoying your villa. You are not a Grimaldi. Scum. You think you won. Pay my debts right now, or I will let the press know you are an unfilial son. I skimmed through those foul words, the corners of my lips lifting into a smile of utter contempt. My sociable, arrogant younger brother was now nothing but a mad dog barking pointlessly outside the fence. Instead of being angry, I just found it ridiculous. This time, I didn't bother stepping to the printer. I didn't care to grab the hole puncher. I pressed the block user button straight away. The navy blue binder had flawlessly completed its mission. The final period had been placed at the 34th receipt. They no longer deserved to cost me another piece of paper or another drop of red ink. The archive of betrayal was officially closed forever. The storm passed, making way for a quiet and brilliant afternoon. The Mediterranean sunlight poured a golden hue over the vast balcony of the villa. The wind carried the smell of sea salt and a gentle lavender scent. I sat on the rattan chair, holding a glass of wine, quietly looking toward the corner of the garden. There, 8-year-old Theo was giggling, his hands stained with mud as grandmother Brigitte taught him how to nurture yellow lemon seedlings. Brigitte, the woman who had spent her youth as a human resources manager at a Monte Carlo casino, was now kneeling on the grass, patiently using her rough hands to wipe every streak of dirt from Theo's cheeks. Seeing me, Theo ran over, his large clear eyes looking up at me full of questions. Papa, the boy hesitated. The woman who came to our house the other day, the one carrying the suitcase. Why did she look at me and cry? Is she really my grandmother? Is she a bad person, Papa? My heart skipped a beat. Theo was a smart child, and I had sworn never to raise my son with toxic lies or fake fairy tales to cover up the crimes of adults. I lifted Theo onto my lap, looking deep into his innocent eyes. She is indeed Papa's mother, your biological grandmother. She isn't exactly a demon, Theo, but she chose a very wrong way to love. I took a deep breath, my voice warm but distinct. When you truly love someone, you are not allowed to force them to do what you want. You don't have the right to turn them into tools to show off or exploit. Your grandmother and grandfather didn't learn that. They pushed Papa away, and the consequence is they lost the most wonderful privilege in this world. That is getting to see you grow up. So they are being punished. Theo blinked. That's right, Papa's angel. They are enduring the punishment they created themselves. I smiled, pointing toward Brigitte, who was busy cleaning up the gardening tools. Look, true family isn't those who force you to share a last name, nor those who use the word bloodline to force you to endure hurt. True family is those who are always ready to be there when you need them. It is the people who fly to your side in the middle of the night, just to lull you to sleep, the ones who shield you when the whole world turns its back. Just like the silent and great sacrifice of grandmother Brigitte. Do you understand? Theo nodded, hugging my neck tightly. I understand, Papa. I love Papa, love Maman, and love grandmother the most. I buried my face in my son's sun-scented hair, feeling an absolute peace flowing through my veins. The decade-long nightmare had officially ended. The life of Luke Grimaldi now had no invisible dark spaces, no more lowly endurance. There was only light, freedom, and an empire protected by genuine love. Thank you so much for listening to the end of this story. If this journey resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like to support us. The most important lesson from this story is that bloodlines don't guarantee loyalty or love. You don't owe your life to people who only use you for their own benefit, even if they are your family. Setting a strong boundary is the best way to protect your peace and the people who truly care about you.